Hey guys, this is your fearless leader, Matthew. So I have a day off of work. I'm going to take you with me to the library. My goal is to find some books on storytelling, synthesize them, break them down, and hopefully give you guys some insights. There's a mist in the air in downtown Dallas. I like when fog covers the buildings. Reminds me of this album artwork by Vampire Weekend. Very festive, nice Christmas decorations. The floor is slippery when wet, be careful. The way we view Santa Claus today was shaped by a 1930s Coca-Cola ad campaign. But I digress. Let's keep walking. We are now approaching the entrance. I'm not sure if there is a flagship location, but the Dallas Public Library has many branches. If you check out a book at one, you can return it back at any of them. I think that's pretty cool. Here's the entrance. I could have taken the elevator, but I thought back to a sign I saw in college. It said burn calories, not kilowatts. So decided to exercise my legs today. Remember, we're looking for books on storytelling. But if we get distracted with some cool fonts along the way, that's okay too. No funny business now. Here's some Dr. Seuss, Just What the Doctor Disordered. It was full of these zany comics. Here's one coming up on Adam's Apples I thought was funny. Shaken, not stirred. And here's some Shel Silverstein. Loved his books as a kid. Fun little illustrations. Someone's disappearing into the binding. Bye-bye. One girl from high school self-published a book called Book of Hours. I bet she got her inspiration from this Kevin Young book. Here's a poem that is beautifully sad. If you're not craning your neck to the side to read the book titles, are you even at the library? And here's some Mark Twain. We have officially ventured into storytelling territory. You know, I'm something of a solo video journalist myself. Does anyone else like using a heavy-duty mechanical pencil sharpener? Just me? Okay. POV, you're my stack of library books. So I just picked up an absolute stack of books from the library, my goodness. I was keen in on books about storytelling. I was finding a few here and there, searching in the nonfiction section, but then a librarian came over. And of course the librarian knows where everything's at. She was able to direct me to the 800s. That's where all the storytelling, novelists, poetry, those kind of books were. Trying to study more so the psychology behind storytelling. Hey everybody, this is future Matthew speaking. Having read through some of these storytelling books, I ultimately decided on one I thought was really interesting. It's called Long Story Short, The Only Storytelling Guide You'll Ever Need. This is by Margot Leitman. Today, my hope is to rapid fire some of the insights that I came across, share them with you, and empower you to take those away and improve your own storytelling. So let's start with the author's definition of storytelling. Here it's defined as recounting a true experience from your life that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I came across this quote early on. It says, revealing vulnerable moments from your everyday life almost always pays off. I try this all the time. Some people are receptive to it, others aren't, but sometimes you can form really unique bonds with people and pretty cool friendships. I did this in college just by talking with random strangers in the dining hall. And whenever I would see somebody sitting by themselves and I was alone, I would decide to strike up a conversation with them. Some of those people I was able to strike up conversations with, I'm actually still friends with to this day. Another quote I enjoyed, an anecdote is the seed of a fully fleshed out story. Although it might sound intimidating to create like a 5 to 6 minute story right off the bat, it begins with an anecdote. Once you find an interesting anecdote, you can sort of build from there. Early on in the book, the author talks about living life for the story. Put yourself in a position to create a good story. Oftentimes this is done through new experiences. If you're trying something brand new, chances are you're probably going to have a polarizing result. You'll either be the savant that's unexpectedly good at something new, or you might actually be terrible at it. Either way, you'll probably have some sort of connection with it and be able to take a story away. One of the earlier chapters in the book is called Getting Past Fear. One of the examples given in the book is sharing your misfortunes. If you're able to share about your shortcomings, it kind of humanizes you as a storyteller, and it also allows your audience to feel better about their own lives. For example, David Sedaris actually shared an unfortunate moment in his life, sort of a low moment. He says, quote, I have an appointment next Wednesday at noon. I'm a 33-year-old man applying for a job as an elf, unquote. This famous author, now famous author, at one point in time was applying for a job as an elf, and it sounds like he probably didn't want to be doing that job. If you have something better than that, you might be feeling pretty good about yourself. Another takeaway, people will care about your life so long as they can relate it to theirs. You might have a story that you're sharing from your own life, but if you're able to keep it fairly universal in its application and allow a lot of people to connect with it, I think that's in your best interest because people want to make sense of it on their own terms. A couple times in the book, the author compares stand-up comedy to storytelling. Definitely some similarities there. You get up in front of a crowd of people, you have a microphone, you take the stage, sharing something from your life. But one key difference is in stand-up comedy, the crowd wants to be dazzled. They're expecting a belly laugh. There's this idea of the crowd kind of crossing their arms like, okay, give me your best shot, show me what you got. Whereas with storytelling, you already have the crowd. They want you to succeed, especially if you're able to come across as an underdog. People love an underdog story. People have all been down and out in some form or fashion in their lives. If you're able to tap into that dynamic, hopefully you're able to win your audience over and keep them rooting for you throughout your story. Another chapter in the book is called The Truth. How much of the truth or how much detail do you need to share when you're telling a story? A couple things to consider would be, don't get caught up in the minutia. That is something that's very hard for me. I like to set the perfect scene, give the audience all this context, but sometimes it can distract from what's actually happening and the purpose of my story. If I'm getting caught up on details like, oh yeah, so back in 10th grade, oh no, wait, was it 11th grade? Oh yeah, it must have been this year. The audience doesn't really care about that, and it might actually distract from your story. Don't even include those details. Another interesting concept discussed in this chapter is giving people nicknames, giving characters nicknames based on defining physical characteristics. The audience might get confused as to who you're talking about if too many characters and names are introduced. Someone broke their arm and they're wearing a cast, you could refer to them, as broken arm guy. Or someone might have red hair, you could refer to them by their red hair. Another point relating to truth in storytelling is being honest about your shortcomings. If you try to portray yourself as the super cool, laid back, never makes a mistake kind of person, you might be seen as an unreliable narrator and people might not believe exactly what it is you're saying. So if you're able to let people into those vulnerable moments in your life and showing that you don't have it all together, you might actually be more credible in the eyes of your audience. Here are a few points to consider regarding the structure of your story. 3 things here. One is the plot. What happens in your story? The second is universal theme. What's the message behind your story? And the third is point of entry. The point of entry is the moment your listener applies your story to his or her own life. So what you want to do with point of entry, give your audience multiple points of entry in a story. Not everyone in your audience will be able to relate to your story at the exact same moment. So if you give multiple points of entry, that's to your advantage because you're allowing your audience more chances to get into your story. So throughout the book, there are these little prompts, like right here, it says tell your story. These are great little exercises sprinkled throughout the book because it allows you to engage more closely with the material. I went ahead and did one of these exercises. So first, you make a thesis about your life, something you believe is true to your life. And then second, you tell a story that proves it to be true. A thesis for my life could be, I am more likely to be sociable and engaging with people when I'm heavily caffeinated. So a story that proves this is, one time my wife and I were at church. I drank my cup of coffee in the morning. A couple sat next to us that we hadn't seen before. And so I introduced myself, talked a little bit with them, and then reconnected after the sermon. In the interest of making new friends, I asked this couple what their plans were for lunch. And long story short, I ended up turning a double date into a triple date. They were super cool about it. I'm still friends with all of them to this day, but that's just an example of how I did something bold and was able to engage with people with a little liquid courage, if you will, in the form of caffeine. Yet another chapter in this book is called Passion. One idea that stuck out to me from this chapter is listeners care more about how you felt about what happened than what actually happened. So don't get caught up in, I need some grand story. It needs to be absolutely incredible and captivating for the audience. Sometimes it can be something kind of mundane and run-of-the-mill that happens, but because you had a strong visceral reaction to this thing, or you felt very passionately in a positive way or negatively about it, and that alone, how you felt about this situation could actually be more impactful or more captivating to the audience than you might think. Another chapter discusses character. Another thing you can do as a storyteller is identify the traits that make you endearing and capitalize on those or take advantage of those. So one example given in the book, a pregnant woman was given a story slam, speaking in front of a bunch of people, and she didn't want her pregnant belly to be a distraction for her audience. So at the outset of her story, she acknowledged that she was pregnant, that she was due in so many weeks, and everybody was healthy. And then she was able to move on and actually get into her story, which had nothing to do with her pregnancy. One thing I'm trying to do is find the stories that I revisit time and time again. What stories am I constantly telling people that friends and family have probably heard a dozen times? So for me, one story that sticks out is watching the movie No Country for Old Men when I was visiting my brother in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So part of this movie was actually filmed in Albuquerque, and we drove by some of the sites where it was filmed. There's this one scene in the movie where the main character, Llewellyn, he comes across a drug deal gone wrong, and there's one guy on his deathbed, laid out in this truck, and he's parched. He wants a drink of water. The only word he can muster to Llewellyn is agua. So the next day, my brother's driving us to brunch. We park our car outside the restaurant we're going to, and my dad doesn't get out of the car right away. So my siblings and me were looking over at our dad like, is something wrong with him? Does he need a moment to himself? And he slowly looks over at us and says, agua. Why have I told this story for years? And why does the audience usually laugh along with me? By asking questions, we begin to learn from the stories we tend to repeat. Another thing you can do with your storytelling is incorporate nostalgia, including specific songs in your storytelling. This helps date your story, or you can describe a specific hairstyle you might have been wearing at the time, specific clothing or outfit, just to describe the era that you were in at the time. Again, this book is, long story short, the only storytelling guide you'll ever need. Who am I to argue with that? I'm just a novice storyteller trying to improve. I hope you enjoyed this rapid fire of random insights about storytelling. In case you want to check out this book for yourself, I'll be sure to include it in the description. I hope you take at least one little nugget away that can help improve your storytelling. Thanks for watching, everybody.